Welcome to the March 6th. All right, we'll try that again. Good evening. Welcome to the March 6th Village Board Legislative Session. This meeting is now called to order. We'll begin with the pledge.
Trustee Bazemore,
Present.
Trustee Herrera,
Present.
Trustee Quezada,
Present.
and Mayor Garrity.
Present.
First item on the agenda is a public hearing in the matter of the application for a planned waterfront special permit by Plateau Associates pursuant to Village Code Section 270-23-1 and 270-54.
Stuart, did you want to introduce it? I see that we have the applicant is here who can provide us with a little background and introduction, but if you'd like to frame it for us, please go right ahead.
Mayor, this is a continuation of the previous public hearing regarding the application on behalf of Hidden Cove on the Hudson. I know we have Mr. Zarin here, and I know he has a short presentation with an attachment that's been given to the board members. So, Michael?
Okay,
Welcome.
thank you. Good evening. Michael Zarin on behalf of the applicant, Plateau Associates, law firm Zarin Steinmetz for the special permit application. It's good to be back. Hopefully, we can get to a closure on this application at this time. If I might, I'd like to just give some background and offer some brief remarks. In lieu of the PowerPoint, we prepared the package and slides. It was also, I believe, published on the, posted on the village's website. And if you'll indulge me, I'll use the slides in my remarks. So if you could turn to page 1, or if you'd like to stay with me on this. Most of you might know, as we tried to describe in our letter to you dated March 1st, 19, this has been a long and arduous process. It's involved numerous village boards, many members and residents of the village who have served on those boards through numerous or multiple administrations, extensive number of public hearings, probably 15, 20 public hearings over the years, work sessions, endless hours by village staff, again, staff that are not here, new staff, and the like. It's been ongoing probably for close to 10 years. Now, Zarin Steinmetz, we've only been involved in this for 9 months, and it's been incredible progress that we've made during those 9 months, as we show on that slide. We received a positive recommendation regarding the local waterfront consistency by the EAC. Planning Board adopted extensive SEQRA findings after years of SEQRA review. The Planning Board made referrals recommending the special permit and license easement to this board. We went to the ZBA and they approved 3 area variances, had a number of meetings with them. Planning Board adopted a lengthy site plan and conditional use approval. SHPO, state agency, I'll talk about that letter, issued an opinion on the office building, and we've been meeting with the HPC and believe we have a path forward with them. We've been now before you since July 2018. And we've obviously had multiple meetings and hearings, an open hearing. Turning the page, those who have not seen the Planning Board's site plan resolution, SEQRA findings, will know or can see that it's a comprehensive and robust document. It reflects years of scrutiny and review of some very dedicated people in this village, both old members, new members that came onto the board, and really members from very many different perspectives, and including some of the preservation and office issues, as well as many of the issues that ultimately emerged under the site plan. There are 48 conditions in that site plan resolution, each of them detailed, forcible, binding, and supported by large rolls of detailed engineering drawings and other documents, easements, and the like that have been reviewed or will be reviewed by Village Council. We have insurances that we have to build pursuant to New York State Building Code and other regulations, that we have to obtain any necessary outstanding permits as a condition to pulling any building permit and starting construction. We have to pay for village consultants to implement and monitor construction. We have to pay for a lead consultant to monitor the implementation of lead. And we have to comply with each of the secret findings and mitigation measures. Those are all official documents that we will be bound by. Turning the page, I don't want to be redundant. I know that this is a project that has evolved and gotten better over the years, and despite some hiccups, I think it's, again, humbly, if I might, it's a good project. It's a project that I think is reflected by the lack of opposition that you see in this room to the project. This is not if this was a project that I think was not a good project, this room would be filled. That's how these things work. And I think we've worked out a lot of the issues over the years to the extent that, while I've known Mr. Fernandez for many, many years and represented him, we have many good years together. There's not many people left in opposition and concerned about some of the deficiencies or what they perceive. But, Mr. Hernandez's views are legitimate, and we've tried to meet them throughout this process. This will revitalize this northern waterfront area. I mean, that's the comp plan. That's the whole purpose of the PWA zoning. You've all been down there probably more than I have. It's a relatively dilapidated, old, former industrial area that you see all along the Hudson River. This project will unquestionably bring an enhancement to that area. It's high-quality architecture. It's gone through 2 or 3 architects. Planning Board, as you all know, had a number of architects on it. We went through many iterations with them. This is very much a light industrial character, Hudson River. In fact, it's good architecture. I've seen sort of the monotone, non-festration, single walls. This I think anyone could be proud of. LEED Gold certifiable, top LEED. This is going to reconstruct all of North Water Street, the current code standards. So even though this does serve the project, it will serve any other development that comes in along that area with a up-to-standard town road maintained by the private users. So it will reduce the impacts and the burden on the village. New sidewalks all along for pedestrian access, which anyone who now tries to upgrade their buildings along that, they'll run all the way from the pump in the beginning of North Water to the end to the Crawbucky, or a little before Crawbucky because we couldn't cross someone's property. But this will facilitate new entrance to Crawbucky, river walks, and really enhance. And again, while it does serve us, it also is a benefit and serves that entire area. We negotiated with the board for a 1.2-acre conservation easement and addition connecting to Crawbucky, so to expand the Crawbucky Preserve by 1.2 acres. That'll be open to the public, and we have to build trails that connect that land, our land, to Crawbucky. Interesting, these are amenities that are not counted in our density bonus. These are just amenities, frankly, that were negotiated with the planning board as being good residents, good citizens, and something that will benefit our project, but benefits the area and the village as a whole. We have to do sewer relining. I'll talk about stormwater for the first time down that area. For the first time, the stormwater that comes from this industrial area will be treated and water quality at the highest best practices standards that have been approved by the village consultants and the DEC. We also have negotiated and sat down with the school district and agreed to work together in the future towards some collaborative programs. Turning the page, At this point, we've been before you for 6 months. In contrast, Hudson Step, not a very dissimilar project, 1 month, 30 days. I have the resolution here, 2014, 3 sentences. Complied with SECRA, you complied with special permit standards, and alike. If you look at the slide, respectfully, and I say that with all sincerity, I think I've mentioned to you before, I've been on your side for Special Land Use Council for many boards, including I was Special Land Use Council for this board, 3 administrations, including Mr. Hernandez's, for Hudson Square and other projects. So I've been on that side. I understand what it means to fulfill your statutory obligations, protect the citizens, and do the right thing. And I spent many years doing that. But if you look at the code for this special permit standard, I'll be honest, it's a sort of strange one. It comes sort of after the fact. It's the planning board does everything. The ZBA does all its work. The ECA does all its work. And then this section says the purpose, quote, the purpose of this subsection is to allow the granting of a special permit that, and in the exchange for the provision of certain amenities, will allow increased densities for particular developments meeting the criteria below. And then they go ahead in section B, they say provide at least one public amenity that's listed. Very, very specific, very objective. We did that. The green building techniques, the LEED Gold, that's one of the amenities that are listed in the code, and that's one of the amenities that you get a density bonus on. And it's not inexpensive. There's a good amount of time and resources that goes into that. The second one listed under subsection C is provide 10% affordable housing. We're doing that. So those are really the sort of the 2 objectives. Now, as I said before, we've provided all those benefits and amenities, the sewer lines, the road, the sidewalks, the land that we're preserving, and we're adding to the Crawbucky Preserve. All those are additional amenities for that area. While it benefits us, it also has benefit for the entire area that we do not seek and are not seeking any type of density bonus for. So at this stage, I would respectfully submit we've satisfied the standards of this special permit. Now, we understand there's been 2 outstanding issues. And the first one is the future of the office building that's on the site. Now, I'm assuming most of you already know this, but I'll just recite it anyhow. The planning board was very on top of this issue. Some of you that know people on the planning board, I would call them preservationists, and this issue was dealt with, and Mr. Gahan and others can attest to this, at length. We had to come back 3-4 times resubmitting. We worked out language. We did studies and the like. This issue was worked out at length with the board. But the reason that this building is there in the first place and that we have this conflict is the planning board many years ago asked that the project that was originally on the plateau acreage above the level area down low, the board said, we do not want any development on the plateau area. We don't want it to conflict with the people that live up there, and we don't want it to interfere. So building was moved to the lower part, right where the remaining office building was. So we did studies to determine whether that building could be moved, and in fact, we agreed with HPC and we agreed with the village. We went out and we hired another consultant called West New York Restoration Report. It's in the materials we gave you. A well-respected group. have done thousands of restorations and preservations around and we agreed with the representatives of the HPC to bring him in with the chairperson and some others and the village historian to be questioned by them as to the efficacy and the substance of his report. That meeting ended with a consensus on everyone's part that it would probably cost between $1.5 and $2 million to move the building, if it could be moved. And this report is a line item of 10 pages of every item about moving and what it would cost to both stabilize it, move it, and restabilize it. And that was $1.52 million. And anyone who was at that meeting, I think, will tell you this was a credible individual. He really was very authentic, wasn't scripted, and gave the information straight to the extent that I think, or maybe he may even be one day working for the village in some things that they knew this stuff. We also went to SHPO, per the planning conditions of planning, the planning board conditions. SHPO, as you know, is the responsible state agency for preservation. We provided that report. We provided other things. SHPO issued a no additional adverse effect letter, meaning that we were permitted to deconstruct the building because of the cost it would be and the impacts. They made some conditions and strict conditions that we incorporate architectural and decorative elements into the pavilion that we had worked out with the planning board, the construction of a pavilion that would be an educational, informative destination built and constructed and designed to reflect the character of the office building and have a lot of educational and historical artifacts in it. They said that we had to incorporate, we had to build that, we had to use interpretive materials to depict the history of the site. When we met with members of certain representatives of the HPC and the village staff, we also discussed that our consultant thought that we could preserve the wood, that the wood was probably the most preservable items in there. The roofs were all destroyed because of time and elements and the way these are built and when they start collapsing. The brick was probably not, he opined that the brick is not strong enough for structural, but we talked about cutting out pieces of the brick and cutting out parts of the wall and using it as facade in the pavilion to capture the effect and feel of it and whatever else can be preserved. So we think we have a path forward with the HPC. The SHPO issued their letter. We are committed to working with the HPC. If you turn the page, you'll see some of the rough drawings of it. Some of these features you can see in the wood that came from the historian, the village historian and others, and we intend to continue to add to this pavilion and really make it a go-to destination that captures the character of that building. So turning to the next issue that we understand is an issue, and that is the discussion about extending the water main on North Water Street. And if you see the chart that we included at, I think, number 7, I believe. Is it 7? I know we changed it. 8, I'm sorry, page 8. You can see that the blue is the existing sewer and water mains that are on the site. And we will need to relocate them. We will need to potentially reline some of them and install, as I mentioned, new stormwater throughout the site. That is approximately $350,000 more. The proposal from some, and this just to make clear, and I'll admit there was some, there was a little bit of confusion that I know the mayor, when she sat in the meeting, picked up on at the last planning board meeting. The looping of this was never discussed, meaning hooking, if you look at the map, hooking the yellow and green onto the red, and the red's the existing water main along Solitude Lane. So that issue was left open for further discussion with the applicant, but at no time were we required to do that. It was never in our performance, and technically it was not required. But what we said, what we would do, and let me just emphasize, and I included a affidavit in your package, and I don't think your consultants will take issue with this, and we've met with them. While water loops are customary, it's better to have a closed loop, one loop system. That is the more traditional. If the cost or the design or other features or circumstances don't facilitate it, a straight dead end works. And there are many dead ends, including there's been a dead end on the street for 20, 30 years, 40, 50 years, whatever the time may be. So it does not affect us. The water would work. A straight loop system, spending out $350,000, $400,000 will work for us. The red is 3 private houses along Solitude Lane. We have an 8-inch pipe. The red is a 4-inch pipe. It's an old 4-inch pipe. And there may be some leaking on it, as there are leaking throughout pipes throughout Westchester. That's why we have to do I&I throughout Westchester as remediation. In many times when you have a pipe that serves you, you have to reline it, which is what we're doing. We're relining and reinstalling and rebuilding the blue pipe that services us. But it would cost over $400,000 to connect the loop and reline those 3 houses, or that pipe, that 4-inch pipe, or expand it to 8-inch. We probably wouldn't even reline it. You'd probably have to expand it to 8-inch to service 3 houses. 3 houses that have nothing to do with our project. We don't affect it. We don't impact it. The water line, we have whatever is existing today, it's not a closed loop, exists tomorrow. Now, we understand that we're all in this area. So we did make a proposal and an offering. We said we can do one of 2 things. We're willing to, if you look at the yellow, we said we'll stub out, we'll build the pipe around past what we need and stub it out. So if you, the village, want to improve that red pipe and build the green and replace it, we'll spend approximately $40,000 to stub it out so that you can finish the loop. We also said we will make a $100,000 contribution to that. Doesn't affect us. Yes, a closed loop could have some efficiency benefits to us, but it's not something we need, and we don't have $400,000 margin. This project, everyone thinks that developers, that they've got internal rates of return of 20, 30%. This project has been ongoing for more than 10 years. For whatever the reason, it's not right on the water. It's back off the water. The economy is not great. The absorption rates are not great. It'll be a successful project, but that $400,000 was never in the pro formas. If we did, we may have gone in for higher density to try to offset that. That's why people do. They try to offset it. Hudson Step, who did off-site improvements, got a density increase for their water and sewer extension. Harbor Square, who did a bunch of piping, got a pilot. We're not asking for pilot. Harbor Square got a pilot where they had their taxes forgiven for the first 5 years by over $600,000 a year. The taxes for the first 5 years were $385,000. Their fair market value was close to $1 million. First 5 years, they paid the $385,000. So yes, we did suggest at one point, why don't we support us for a pilot? And we'll take that pilot money in the savings and put it into the into that pipe. But that's how those two projects were able to afford doing some of the off-site amenities, respectfully. We also, as part of a compromise, and we included language in your letter, and I thought, frankly, I thought this was a really good way to move forward. And I've been on this side, I've done projects. Sometimes you can't get everything done today, and yes, you punt a little. We said, we'll escrow the 100,000. We'll build the yellow, the loop. Let's see how the water works. If our water is stagnating, or we have to keep flushing it to do it, or the water pressure is low for some reason, then we'll step up, because then it's us. We need it. So let's build it. We'll escrow 100,000. Let's see what happens. It will get built. You'll have people living there, and they'll be the people who will be pressuring, frankly, us and the like. So turning the next page, this is not before you, but we have a proposal that will come before you. Frankly, we thought it was before you now, and then as we started to go through the process, we were told that the board wanted to sort of bifurcate. The special permit is, if you look at the next page, we need a license and easement for you to 672 square feet in what they call Lot 6. You can see that lot right off the road, North Water. Now, this was something that the planning board wanted us to get because it enables us to build the sidewalk and connect the sidewalk. So it's like a 672 square feet, which is what, about 6 feet? Or how much right-of-way we need on the red area? 5 feet. So if you see that red area on the what I provided you, you can see it changes width, but it's about 5 feet. So Lot 6 is 1.02 acres. Lot 6 is 44,000 square feet. This would be a license of 600, or easement of 672 square feet, so we can build the sidewalks. Planning board recommended it. Planning board wanted us to do it. We were willing to do it. It makes sense. It creates that whole amenity that we talked about. People now from all the way from North Water can come. One of the reasons we have to do this, if you look closely, you'll see a little area, and you probably won't see it, but the pump station was built right there. So the pump station pushed the road out a little bit. So we need that to get the sidewalk, because we're not removing the pump station. In fact, we're doing some improvements to the pump station that, again, will benefit everyone. So, again, that's something that we have asked. Importantly, we can build the project without it. Frankly, it makes, respectfully, I mean, I know the village wants to maybe preserve this area for other development, but we don't have to build a sidewalk there. There'll be a cut where you see the red, sidewalk will start, it'll stop during that red area in red, and then it'll continue. We have enough footage to build the roads to standards, to village standards as approved by the village engineers and reviewed by the village. Sidewalk is an amenity. So frankly, unless the village has some reason that they need that 672 square feet, we would respectfully ask to grant us that easement and allow us to build the sidewalk. So respectfully, and I say this with all sincerity, we're at the end. We've done everything. Talk to anybody in the village. Talk to your planning board members. Talk to your ZBA members. Talk to EAC, Conservation Board. Talk to all these empty seats that are not here tonight, so-called opposing our project. talk to members of the HPC we've been working with diligently. We're at the end. This is it. The last thing we want is a train wreck. I mean, it would be, it'd be, in my view, it would be such a waste of resources for everybody. We've come too far. It's a good project. It has a lot of benefits. There's been so much hard work that's been put in by so many people. And we ask you, in the spirit of fairness and due process, to please close the hearing tonight, since nobody sort of left, respectfully, and vote. And if you vote us down, you vote us down. And we all do what we have to do. And it's the last thing we want, I can assure you that, by any measure. If you vote us up, you have a good project, you have all these things are enforceable. Mr. Kahan, your other staff members, and Debbie, and the village manager, they've been all over us. They will do the agreements that bind us and are enforceable. And if anybody knows this firm and us, we respect that process. And we assure you that those agreements will be binding, they will be good, and they will be right, and the village will have collectively done their job. So with that, we would again ask you please to close the hearing tonight, vote, and allow us to move on and allow us to build what I think will be a very good project for the village and its residents. And we're here to answer any questions. We have our engineer. We have my colleague who's been living and breathing it. We have the principals here. We'd much rather you just say yes. But we defer. So. Thank you.
Thank you.
No, I think.
Yes.
We're going to open up to public comments now. Welcome.
Good evening.
On behalf of all of these empty seats, but really on behalf of many, many people who are in opposition to this project, I am their, at least for this evening, I am their representative. As our esteemed council mentioned, this project has taken a long time, and there's a very good reason for that. And the reason is that this, from the beginning, this was a very ill-conceived project. Yes, there have been many architects, may I say, many lawyers. I believe you are the fifth set of lawyers that have represented this client over time. If there's been any delays, okay, as project, it is because the project and the developers themselves have held up this project. And one of the things that they did to help up this project is they never came before the Historic Preservation Commission. Okay? A lot was mentioned here about the planning board. I want to tell you that the planning board is absolutely incompetent in terms of historic preservation. They know nothing of historic preservation. That is not their expertise. They're very expert people. They're very good people. But insofar as historic preservation, I would not take a single word that they say on it, okay, because that's not what they're chartered to do, and that's not what they're trained to do, and so forth. So, the reasons this project has been held up for so long is because it is a project that was ill-conceived from the beginning. The developer, when he came first on board, promised to keep the building as it was and to keep its facade as it was. And there was general agreement to that. And then he changed his mind. And then, in order to reinforce that, this developer engaged in a process called demolition by neglect. He never spent a penny in maintaining the building, in keeping it up, and even minimal protection of this building. Now, since you're going to talk about this pavilion, let me tell you that once you put this pavilion in, if it goes in at all, and I certainly hope not, you will have lost the historic designation that this village has given to this building, and that the state government has given to this building, and that the federal government has given to this building. That area will no longer be historic. You will have erased history. You will have erased the honor that this building has. If you want to go down as a board that destroyed its history, then you'll have to make that decision. I urge you certainly not to do it. Now, promises, as you well know from other developers, promises are made and rarely are they kept. Because later on, they will discover, oh, we forgot this or we forgot that, and we need to do this and we do that. So all of this thing, I'm sure, I hope you will take with any promise that any developer makes to you. Please take that with a grain of salt. Let me finish up here. I won't take as much time as the developer does in presenting this thing. But let me say this, that my friends on the historic preservation they're good people. They're basically new people. Not a single one of them is a preservationist. Okay? You have a village historian. She's a great person, a personal friend of mine. She's not a preservationist. She doesn't know very much about historic preservation, frankly. Okay? This is not a knock on her, but I'm saying, and all of the new people that you've appointed, all of the people who had the history of this whole project and who are specifically trained in historic preservation, like myself, with an advanced degree in that subject, are no longer on the board to advise you as to what can be done and what cannot be done. So basically, you're dealing with two people who are real estate people, I believe, one person who's a banker, one person who's a lawyer, okay, who's the chair, but they're very new to the game of historic preservation. They don't know very much about it. They really have very little background, and since they're new, we've lost all of the institutional knowledge that was there before with the former board who had served for many years. And they could have been consulted, but they weren't. Again, I think that having the historic preservation now come in at the end of it, when they should have been the first people who should have been consulted by you, by the planning board, by the Board of Review, Architectural Review, and all of the other boards, they should have been, the Historic Preservation Board should have come in first. So the process has been sort of turned on its head. Obviously, you're going to make a decision based on whatever facts you have, but these are the facts that I'm presenting to you from the perspective of a historic preservation person who has been with this project from the beginning. You're going to lose the historic preservation designation for this village, for that particular project, and you'll be setting a dangerous precedent, because from now on, every developer who comes before you, okay, with a building that is historic will say, well, gee, why don't I get the same treatment? I'm going to tear it down, okay, because you let this project be torn down, okay? So now you've set a precedent that you can't turn your back on. You're going to have to deal with that thing. You're also going to destroy the jobs that are down there. There are currently about 60, 75 people who work down there, okay? And they're going to be under a lot of pressure by this developer because he's a litigious person. And he is going to be, and he has sued people, by the way, myself included, okay? So he's a litigious person, and the tenants who live there are going to start saying, well, get rid of this building, it's too much traffic, it's too many trucks, too many this, too many that, too much noise. You're going to be dealing with an untenable situation for years to come if you allow this project to go through as it stands. So I urge you to consider what's going to happen in the future, the loss of historic designation, the loss of jobs that are down there now, okay? And you have to have a place in this village where people can work, can make a contribution to what's going on, not some luxury tenant. That's not really going to contribute very much to our village. We have plenty of those. We have enough of those, okay? This certainly is one. Now, they're saying, well, we're not going to ask for a pilot. Well, I think that's kind of an empty promise. And this happened to us with Hudson Step. You know, we rushed through the project, we gave them, we said, okay, do this, and the next thing they turn around and they want a pilot. So I would, that's another thing. Now, as to this water line and so forth, I don't know very much about that, but this water line needed to be replaced anyway. It's well over 150 years old, okay? And it breaks down considerably so many times, so it costs the village money to send people there at all hours of the night and day to come and fix it. So, but anyway, that's really up to you. That's a separate issue.
Mr. Hernandez?
So I think that's about, I think you gave him a whole lot of time. Are you going to shut me up?
Well, you're the only person speaking, so, and we didn't put a timer on, so I'm allowing you to,
Okay.
but please do wrap it up.
Okay.
I think you got your key
I'm
points.
wrapping it up,
Thank you.
Mayor. I'm wrapping it up.
Thank you, sir.
So I urge you to take into consideration the other factors involved here, not what is good for one particular developer. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Are there others who would like to comment during the public hearing? Welcome.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, Board of Trustees, staff. My name is Nick Stolatis. I'm a member of the Plateau Associates. Mr. Zarin has presented the legal presentation before you. He's made some very cogent points. However, I was not intending to speak but for the fact that Mr. Hernandez has stepped forward, and as a historian, as a professional historian, as he's designated himself, he has a very poor memory for history. And I will remind everybody that Plateau Associates spent half a decade and several $1 million attempting to adaptively reuse the old Brandreth Pill Factory. We had plans, we had programs, we had everything laid out. We spent 4 years in front of the planning board, at the end of which the planning board said, we're not going to let you diversify and disperse the allowed density, so you have to build everything on the existing site, the 5 acres, even if it means tearing the building down. Now, during that period of time, Mr. Hernandez was one of the most aggressive opponents to our adaptive reuse of the Brandreth Pill Factory. In 2008, when the planning board basically told us that we can't build what we were proposing that would allow the adaptive reuse, we changed the program to what they had suggested, a single structure on the site, which necessitated the demolition of the Brandreth Pill Factory. We sought and obtained from the village a demolition permit. Mr. Hernandez is well aware of this because he was on the inaugural committee of the HPC when it was formed in 2012, and was fully aware that there was a demo permit in place when he proposed to landmark the very first building, the Brandreth Pill Factory, which had been scheduled for demolition. And when Plateau Associates presented a very extensive report, I can't even tell you how many thousands of dollars were spent assembling information, all in support of the opposition to a designation of that building. The HPC, and Mr. Hernandez was on the HPC, did not even consider the reports. In fact, the chairperson mockingly asserted that they did not even look at our reports. They simply went ahead and designated the building as they recommended the designation as a local landmark, and the Board of Trustees approved it at that time. In 2015, even though we had not started the demolition at any time, 2015, the building department started assessing violation notices. They had engaged in several campaigns over the years, assessing violation notices, none of which were ever supported or sustained. Every one of them was overturned. In 2015, for 45 consecutive days, they filed violation notices. Now, Mr. Kahan, you stated Section 16238, which was in existence in the village code at the time, allowed for the demolition of a building that was subject to violations as a cure for those violations. Regardless of whether it was landmarked or not, HPC had no jurisdiction in that decision to execute on the demolition permit. It was started. The demolition was interrupted by Mr. Hernandez, who claimed that we were demolishing the building without a demo permit. The building department came down, the building inspector issued a stop work order claiming there was no demo permit and stopped the work, chased the demolition contractor off the site, and we were left with a semi-demolished building. The courts ultimately ruled that, in fact, the demo permit was valid, continues to be valid, and allowed for the demolition to continue. The office building was retained because the planner at the time stepped forward and claimed that it was a separate and distinct building, not subject to the demo permit. Demo permit which was thought to have not existed. We have shown Mr. Kahan plans that, in fact, that entire section was, in fact, considered one building, taking that argument away. We also have the full demolition permit, which included and noted that specific building to be torn down. Yet it continues today because the stop work order exists, notwithstanding that it was put into place by the perjury of the building inspector. For Mr. Hernandez to come in and tell this board that, in fact, the Brandreth Pill Factory had not only local, but state and national designations is incorrect. In fact, the national landmark had turned down the application of the Brandreth Pill Factory in 1980. Mr. Hernandez is well aware of that. Mr. Hernandez should also understand that demolition by neglect cannot possibly occur when there's a demolition permit in place. A demolition permit which has been in place since 2008, when our effort to adaptively reuse the Brandreth Pill Factory was stopped. So, personally, I've had the displeasure of witnessing years and years of this type of activity, these type of false statements against Plateau Associates. Mr. Zarin has stated that we are presenting a program that meets, and in fact, it was designed to respond to the village's own desire to reinvigorate the waterfront. The fact that there is no sidewalk along North Water Street. Anyone who visits Crawbucky, it puts their life at risk because they have to walk in the asphalt pavement. There is no sidewalk there now. The continuation of these circumstances for the last several years has posed who knows how many situations of risk of life and limb to residents or visitors who walk along North Water Street to get to Crawbucky. Including yourself, Madam Mayor, you said you were at the opening in 2012. You had to walk along North Water Street's asphalt, no sidewalk. So we are proposing a program. We've been asked that let's not raise the hackles of the village administration. For me to sit here and listen to what I just heard, there's no such thing as raising the hackles. We said the Pledge of Allegiance and justice for all. I'm sorry, but we have not seen justice, and we ask that this board execute justice and approve this project and allow us to move forward with a program that will make everybody in Ossining proud, well, almost everybody in Ossining proud. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Stellatis. Do you want to comment before the board comments or brings up questions?
Just a few things for the members of the board. Thank you, Mayor. With regard to the issue of the office building, which is still on site, a couple of weeks ago there was a meeting that was attended by the village manager, myself, 3 members of Historic Preservation, Mr. Zarin, Mr. Schwartz from his office, as well as the gentleman from West New York Restoration. There were numerous discussions there, and I understand what Mr. Hernandez was saying about the current members of the board, but I think that's a bit unfair, because the truth be told, not only were they very much engaged and have been very much engaged throughout this process, but there was an extensive give and take in terms of what could and could not be done with regard to that building. It is anticipated that at the April 1st HPC meeting, which is next month's meeting, there will be an application presented by Hidden Cove on the Hudson for a certificate of appropriateness with regard to the, if you want to call it, taking down portions, and in fact, taking down the building, the office building, and preservation of portions of that building to be employed in the new structure that's to be built in the vicinity, but not directly on the property itself. Those are ongoing discussions, but I do think it's important to note that this was a meeting that took about 2 hours. There was, as I said, a good deal of give and take. There were further discussions by the HPC members at their meeting this past Monday. So they are very much on top of what is going on with regard to this building. They were very, very insistent that whatever could be done with regard to the portions of the building to be maintained be done. What I certainly agree with Mr. Zarin is that the individual from West New York who came to that meeting showed not only his love of historic restoration, but also the practicalities of the situation and the costs that can be involved with regard to this. And that was something that was very much considered by the HPC members, including the chair who attended that meeting. So I do want to get that clear. With regard to some of the other points that Mr. Zarin has made, much of which has already been restated here. There was planning board approval. Site plan approval has been given. As Mr. Zarin notes, there are multiple conditions that are contained in there. There are things that have to be done before a building permit can be issued. There are things that have to be done before a certificate of occupancy is issued. And it's a total of 48 conditions, and it's a lengthy document in terms of what goes on there. With regard to the issue of the water, it was a little unclear from what Mr. Zarin was saying tonight with regard to the $100,000. It was unclear if that was in fact a contribution or if that was an escrow payment. I'm not asking for clarification right now, but I do want to just point that out, that an escrow is something that's held for something to be done. Contribution is simply something that's being contributed for something to be done regardless. The issue as to the looping system, you have all had I sent you the March 1st letter from council, which included the affidavit from their engineer, who didn't dispute the reasonableness of a loop system. And there is a question whether the loop system should be there or should not be there. It is the position of the village's water superintendent and engineer that the loop system is a better system to have. We now have a 4-inch pipe at that location, which is not acceptable to the county anyway. It would have to be an 8-inch pipe that would be needed there. As Mr. Hernandez correctly noted, that pipe has had numerous fractures over the number of years. I think 15 in the past 4. So it's old. It's well over 120 years old at this point. So I think that's again something to be considered. Finally, let me just deal with one of the last things that Mr. Zarin talked about, which was the 672 square feet, which is that area leading right off of North Water Street. That is not before the board right now, but it was raised tonight. And one thing to note, if this board, well, 2 things. First, with regard to it being of sufficient width even if the sidewalk is not constructed. That is something that we would obviously want our engineer to confirm, to make sure that is in fact the case. But I do want to point out to the board that if this board were at some time to determine that it did not wish to enter into a license or easement agreement for that 672 square feet, the applicant would then have to go back to the planning board. The resolution of approval by the planning board has a specific provision that if that 672 square feet of space is not granted, they must go back to the planning board with regard to their site plan. So I just want that pointed out to the board. So that's understood. In terms of this evening, we only had Mr. Hernandez, we've had Mr. Zarin, we've had Mr. Stellatis. The board could decide tonight to close the public hearing. There was a point made in the March 1st letter that any decision by the board at this date is late, but it is 62 days from the public hearing. That is interpreted as 62 days from the close of the public hearing. Public hearing has not yet been closed, so the 62 days has not yet started to run. What this board has a couple of options in terms of what they can do with the permit application. They can grant the permit. They are certainly permitted to grant the permit with permission. That is specifically provided for in the village code with regard to special permits, which provides that the village board, in approving any special permit, thereunder shall require conformance to any supplementary requirements applying to such uses generally, and may establish such other conditions or limitations upon the use or characteristics of the use which are reasonably related to the public health, safety, and general welfare as may be necessary to carry out the intent of the chapter. Similarly, the New York State Village Law, Section 7-725B4, says the authorized board shall have the authority to impose such reasonable conditions and restrictions as are directly related and to and incidental to the proposed special use permit. So you can put conditions on your permit. You could grant a permit with conditions. In fact, effectively, that's what the planning board did in granting their site plan approval. They granted it with conditions. But if the board chose tonight, it could close the public hearing and can then have its own deliberations and then render its decision. That's all I have for now.
Could one of those conditions, a condition be, we could close the public hearing, we could close the public hearing and not vote on it tonight?
That would be
And we would have
correct.
62 days in which to vote on it.
That's correct, Madam Mayor.
We could close the public hearing and vote on it tonight as it's written currently. We could close the public hearing and vote on it tonight with a condition related to the looping or anything else that we wanted. That was appropriate based on what you just read, not just anything else we wanted, because I'm not going to ask for a Ferris wheel in the middle of the street, but for anything that is relevant to this project that's been raised as a concern.
What I would propose, that if the board wanted to impose a condition such as the looping system, that similar to what is done with the planning board, where you have almost a finding statement, that the board, as part of it, approve a statement as to why they are imposing this particular condition, so that it is on the record as to what the reasoning for that is, that, the necessity of this and the reasonableness of it to the particular use and for this particular project. That's really what I think that would be important. We can put that into the record as part of it. But if the board wanted to, they could do that tonight, and we can always, then subsequently adopt the finding statement. The finding statement is not to be done right now, but I do think it's an important thing to be there, just to have the record complete.
Questions?
Thank you. Thank you, Stuart, for some of the clarifications, additional clarifications, and some of the questions that I actually had, and some of the stuff that you and I have spoken before. I was saying thank you, Stuart, for some of the clarifications that he just did, and some of the stuff that I had before, and the conversations that him and I had in the past couple of weeks. I do want to say two different remarks, I guess, to some of the comments that were made early in the meeting. One of them it was raised, and that's something that I have done it in the past with different developers. And one of the things is just put aside everything, and regardless of the approval process or anything to that nature, is I had asked them in a public setting if they have the funding to do the project, if they were get the permit the next day. And both of them that I have sort of the pleasure and non-pleasure to ask that question, both of them have said, we have the funding. Those two developers were mentioned on this meeting. And one of them did get a pilot. The other one tried to get a pilot, and it did not get a pilot. So for someone to come in and make that statement, you know, thank you for doing that, because now it's on a public record. The other comment that I was mentioning here is regarding to one of the projects, Hudson Steps, and how the process went. I was part of the board. I'm not sure if everything was that was said was correct, but the big difference from that project and this particular project that we're looking at right now is they're preserving a historic house. They're doing all the improvements that went through the proper channels. So to compare or to make a statement, comparison between that project and another project, I took that as a little bit of an offense, I guess. That being said, I'm okay with closing the public hearing, and I will ask my colleagues not to make any decisions at this time, because they do have to go in front of the HPC in April. There's still some other questions that I have. I'm not sure if any of my other colleagues have spoken to our colleague, Rika. I did this morning, and she also has concerns with this particular project. So, again, I'm okay with closing the public hearing, but I will not make decisions at this time. And it's not for you to answer any questions that I have. It was just a remark. But thank you.
It's time for the board to be able to speak. So if we have any specific questions that we need your help with, we will certainly be grateful that you're here, Mr. Zarin. Does anybody else have any questions or comments? Comments or questions from other trustees? No?
So, Stuart, you had talked about the reasonableness and definitely modifications. I would definitely like to. I have a few questions for you. Not now.
We do it as an
yeah,
advisory
vice
council.
counsel.
Of course, sure.
I do want to raise a couple of questions because there are a couple of things that are concerning.
Absolutely.
And I will say I am either way. I know I spoke to Rika earlier today, and she had made mention that she would at least like the public hearing to be opened at least 2 more weeks. I don't have a problem with that, but if the rest of the board feels that they want to close it now and then allow her to, other ways, then
I'm okay with, I kind of am pretty okay with what Trustee Quesada mentioned. I'm okay with us closing the public hearing today. Meanwhile, wait as the other areas get addressed. So, HPC, proposals that haven't been brought to the board yet or added today. But I definitely feel that we should close the public hearing.
Did you have more to say?
No.
Okay, so it seems like there may be some interest in closing the public hearing, but not voting tonight. But before we make that decision, there are not so many things that were mentioned today. And it's a good reminder of, there's 3 sides to every story. And we've heard 1 or 2 of the sides so far tonight. And I've had an opportunity to speak with a variety of staff members and the volunteer members of our land use boards about this, as well as attend and view meetings. And I believe this property has been under consideration for actually like 12 or 13 years. So if we, wait 2 more weeks before we vote on anything, it probably in the whole scheme of things might seem frustrating, but but really, is a blip when you think about the many, many years this has been going on. But I do want to specifically address some of the, sometimes even allegations, but assertions, perceptions, and perspectives of what's been going on. The last meeting of last year, the planning board approved the site plan with a number of conditions, as was cited here, but some of them were still contingent upon things being worked out, and there were really 4 contingencies that I think of, and one of them was the HPC, one of them is, of course, this planned waterfront special permit, one of them is the land access that we've talked about, the 672 square feet, which, thank you, Stuart, for letting us know that if this is not approved, if that's not approved, then the whole site plan needs to go back to the planning board. And one of them being the water line, the looping of the water line, which is certainly the most financially significant of the contingencies. Well, only the most financially significant because of how the historic preservation process unfolded. And there's a piece of that story that I didn't hear mentioned today. And Stuart, I'm looking at you so you can help remind me because it wasn't just looked at on a local level. It wasn't just looked at by the consultant who was hired by the applicant. It was also reviewed by SHPO, and they came back originally and didn't say that much, but then it went higher than that. It went to the federal government, it went to another agency. Who sent the, when I read the letter?
What happened was there was initially a letter from SHPO in 2018. That letter, which was from the SHPO office, I believe up in Albany, raised certain issues with regard to the office building and took the position that the reports that had been provided by the applicant, and at that point the applicant had not yet retained the services of West New York Restoration, so these were their other reports. I think it was by Denardis Engineering. SHPO did not put much faith in those particular reports and thought that there was more that could be done with regard to the building. There was then what's called a Section 106 review, which is really under the federal, and a lot of that has to deal with the Army Corps of Engineers because we're in that area. That resulted in additional submissions by the applicant to SHPO. It resulted in the West New York Restoration Report. That generated a letter from SHPO at the end of January of 2019. That letter was, the best way to describe it is 180 degrees different than the earlier SHPO letter. That letter essentially said that we've read the West New York letter. It appears to us that there's really nothing that can be done with regard to this building, and your proposal with regard to if it's going to be taken down, they were not going to stand in the way of that. So that was the January 31 SHPO letter. That letter was provided to the members of the HPC, and they were concerned about it because it was so diametrically different than the initial letter that had been received. That resulted in communications with applicants' counsel and then resulted in the meeting that was attended by the West New York representative to essentially answer questions with regard to what was the nature of the work that they did. There was also some communication with the author of the second SHPO letter by Adam Markovics, the chair of the HPC, and the letter writer who is, I believe, he's certainly senior to the person who wrote the initial letter. He may even be head of the office, if I'm not mistaken. Essentially said that we based it upon the information that we've now received, and we believe that this is what our position is. But it was that subsequent letter plus the West New York report, which then led to the meeting where where we had 3 of the 7 HPC members there. To figure out what to do.
Thank you. It's that second SHPO letter that I'm referring to, and I believe that arrived very soon after we continued this public hearing to the March 6th, knowing that we were going to have some hefty February public hearings, and we were hoping that we would have some of this resolved by then. Now, it had been my expectation late in 2018, after we'd had work sessions, and it had been asserted by the applicant that there was absolutely no need to go before the Historic Preservation Commission, that there was no need for a certificate of appropriateness. It had been my expectation that we were going to reach this stage, and the village was going to very much enforce our village code, which would have required a certificate of appropriateness. It might have required, if the HPC felt it was necessary, it might have required additional escrow from the applicant to go out and get additional consulting perspectives. However, as this unfolded, and SHPO came out with their revised perspective and their revised recommendations, and let me just express it the way that I read it. This office building was a piece of an historic campus that was very significant to Ossining history. There's a different perspective of the demolition that took place of the Brandreth Pill Factory was presented tonight than I had ever perceived it to be, but there had been a very historic pill factory that was there that is no longer there. This office building was deemed to be on its own, just not rising to the level of significance, clearly, of what it was when it was a full campus, and not rising to the level of significance to warrant a $1.5–2 million effort to be able to preserve it or move it. And it was 180 degrees from what we had anticipated. And so as far as the contingencies that were on the table, as I listed those four, to my mind, based on how this was the recommendation we now have from the state equivalent of our HPC, the SHPO, and our HPC, there has been a resolution and a recommendation for how we move forward with that. That is not the piece that I'm still concerned about at this point. It's certainly not my area of expertise, although I was very much prepared to enforce our village code in relation to that, and Corporation Counsel and I had spoken about that following the meeting because I was surprised at how it was being interpreted. But it is not where we thought it would be a couple of months ago, based on developments with SHPO and the HPC's processing of that. So the other items, before we stop talking about that, I'll just say the demolition permit that was referenced, the village now has a better demolition permit than we did. As a result of that process, there's now an expiration date on our demolition permits. And I will also say that that demolition permit, that regardless of how anything shapes out in court, there was a list of requirements that needed to be fulfilled for that demolition permit to have been to be executed properly, and they were not even attempted to be fulfilled at the time, which makes me a little nervous that an applicant would be granted a permit with contingencies and then flagrantly disregard them and move forward anyway, particularly when we are now talking about permits with contingencies. And I also want to correct something which is super minor, but I was at the ribbon cutting and walking on Crawbucky in 2012. It was before I was even in office. But the entrance that we use, that most people use, is on Beach Road. I think one of the amenities that this would really provide for the community is another access point from the waterfront that I think would be lovely. I have walked down that road, but that's because I've walked every block in the village. Most people don't ever walk down that road. So as far as pedestrian safety, that's not the biggest concern right now. It will be a lovely amenity and addition to our community when there is a sidewalk there and there is appropriate access from Crawbucky. The only time I've ever entered Crawbucky from that direction is when I, for some ridiculous reason, participated in the 5K run that we did in 2013, and we ran through there. It was a record slow 5K, but I did complete it, and we were able to access it that day. There is also, when it comes to the 672 square feet easement, the applicant's assertion that they can do it without the village's agreement, and which apparently is patently not true because it would have to go back to the planning board, but that it wouldn't be necessary for the roadway and only for the sidewalk. That is contradictory to what our engineers and engineering consultants have said, and I also don't even, I'm not a cartographer, but that I need somebody to show me on the map how that is possibly the case, but that, again, is not what we're deciding tonight. But it's one of the other inconsistencies in the messaging that we're getting tonight. Thank you very much for mentioning the pilot, Trustee Quesada. That has been raised to me as well. Ginsburg, they had $2.5 million in their bond that they took out for public improvements, which included the water line that went up and down Snowden Avenue, because that was deemed to be an essential component to their project. That's a very big bond that they took out to do public improvements to infrastructure, much larger than what's being considered here. And did they get a pilot? They did. Totally separate process. Totally separate process. A pilot is not part of a site plan approval. It goes through the county IDA. Certainly we weigh in on it, but it's not a planning board decision. And also, there is no way for us to say, for you to guarantee that a pilot will not be requested later on. You could get all of the approvals, sell it to Mr. Smith tomorrow, and Mr. Smith could apply for a pilot next week. So that trying to link the two doesn't make any sense. So really what the big sticking point is that comes down to is this water looping. And I want to clarify. I don't think anybody in village government would suggest that providing a water line for 3 houses is an appropriate, is a valid excuse for a public amenity. That's not what's being suggested here by the village engineers. What the village engineers are suggesting and recommending in their expertise, as is required by our village code that the village engineer approve this, and really should have happened before the site plan approval, but it was left as a contingency, so that's still hanging out there, is that the loop is what's necessary, that is the proper process, that is the proper way to structure a water system. And I find it very strange that on the one hand, we're told that it's not financially possible because it wasn't in the pro forma to include this $400,000 additional expense for the loop. But then why don't we just build it and see? And you know what, if the water feels a little stagnant and people complain, well, then we'll come up with the $400,000 because then we'll know that it's necessary. That doesn't even compute to me. So I am very pleased by what Corporation Counsel has said, that we have the opportunity to consider approving this waterfront special permit with a condition. And I realize that there have been many, many changes in personnel in so many positions, including the attorneys and engineers for the applicant. And while our engineers have been consistent in the village for many years of this process, we have, this is our 3rd planner, we have a new village manager, we have a new corporation counsel, we have new planning board members. So there has been a lot of changes, and perhaps some of the communication that had been done 1 or 2 or 3 years ago wasn't fully understood by folks in those positions today. And so we have come to this sort of impasse when it comes to the expense of the loop. This is not the first time it's been discussed. My understanding from the consulting engineers and the engineer is discussed years ago, perhaps with the previous engineer, perhaps with previous attorneys. It is unfortunate that we have come to this point and it is still unresolved as to exactly how that happened. And perhaps there are people who had expectations or made statements saying that it wouldn't be necessary, but if it was not stated by the folks who have the authority to make that decision, then it may have been prematurely stated. So, as we move forward, whether we close the public hearing tonight or not, I think it is, I'm consistently saying we should support the recommendations of our village engineer because it is their responsibility to make sure that we have adequate water supply, that we are following best practices, that we are providing the infrastructure necessary for a large apartment building when it is being built at the end of a roadway, and that this process, part of the reason why it's so long is because we have a lot of checks and balances in place. If we were to allow this to go forward without adequately providing for the infrastructure necessary for this, then what we're doing, the reason why nobody is here complaining is because they don't know that if we ignore the recommendations of our water engineer and our village engineer, that it will be the taxpayers coming up with $300,000 or $400,000 to provide the proper infrastructure for this development. I guarantee you, if we start telling everybody, if you don't want to spend $300,000 or $400,000 on the necessary infrastructure to build a luxury apartment building, you better show up and complain, then people will complain. But they don't understand that because this is so deep in the weeds. It's not an easy thing for people to show up and complain about or ask about. So, thank you for letting me get all of that on the record, again. Do we have a motion to close the public hearing? Though perhaps not vote tonight.
I make a motion, we close the public hearing.
Second that.
Comments on the board? All in favor? Of closing?
Yes, my only comment, and
Yes.
I don't need to know now. A lot was said. This has been a long process. I still, with the hope and desire to respect the role and separate entity of land use boards and their determinations, I want to know, like literally step by step, like after close the public hearing tonight, what the village's, what this board's role is going forward specifically. I mean, we already know a couple of areas, and Mary Gay already just alluded to the biggest one at the end when it comes to our engineer and all of that. So, but I do want to know. I mean, we heard a lot about HPC, what their next steps are, but I do want to know as far as the village board of trustees, step by step, next role, given all of these factors, what they are from tonight and on. And I know that you can.
Well, I can tell you briefly.
Yeah.
This board has to make the decision on the permit application that's before you now.
Right.
And that's one thing. The applicant is also looking for that 672 square feet. And that's at the very...
Which is separate.
Separate. That's at the beginning of North Water Street, across from Virium, effectively.
Yes.
That would be something this board would have to approve because it would involve village property. So those are two actions that right now the village board will have to decide at some point. The only other land use board, well, let me preface that. HPC has to decide the issue with regard to the certificate of appropriateness. And that, I believe, is on for April 1. In addition, the Board of Architectural Review will have to issue its decision with regard to the exterior of the building. That has not yet been presented. So that'll come, when they're ready to present that to BAR. But for this board, it's the decision on the permit application that is the subject of this public hearing, and the future determination with regard to the 672 square feet. Those are the two aspects of this process that directly involve this board.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments before we vote? Madam Clerk?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The next item on this agenda is
You know what,
Mayor...
can we just take a 3-minute break? Okay, thank you. Thank you. All right, I guess Debbie's out there talking to the applicant, so we'll just start. Yes.
So we'll move on to mayor's and trustees' announcements.
Anybody have announcements this week?
I do, and I will be fast. I have quite a few. So first of all, congratulations to the Ossining High School girls varsity basketball team, and best of luck for what's to come. This Saturday, March 9th, is Jazz at the Lodge, which is at the Ossining Elks Lodge, and it's beginning at 7:30 and ending at 10:30. I believe it's $10, and it goes to the musicians and the house. The Greater Ossining Chamber of Commerce will be hosting their second annual Eat, Drink, Dance St. Patrick's Trolley Pub Hall on March 15th at 6 p.m. For tickets and information, visit osseningchamber.org or just call 941-0009. This upcoming Tuesday is a Albany Day of Action, pushing for drivers licenses as part of Project Greenlight. And if you're an Ossining resident, you actually have an opportunity to join one of the many buses that are leaving the county to go up to Albany. And if you want to learn how that works and join what's expected to be quite the amount of people heading to Albany, please call 914-666-3410. And this, which is sent to me this Friday, I kind of wish that it wasn't at 10 a.m. while everyone's working, but the New York State Senate is hosting a Hudson Valley public hearing regarding Metro North in Westchester. And that's going to be held at 10 a.m. on this Friday, March 8th, and it's going to be at White Plains City Hall, 255 Main Street, White Plains, New York. I am going to request, I can't go, and I'm assuming many people can't go because it's during the day, but how people can send their feedback, because this particular hearing is for Metro North stations in service and feedback mainly in Westchester County. So that is that, and that's about it. Thank you.
Others with announcements?
Yes, so the Star Bethlehem Baptist Church Men's Ministry is having their 64th annual Brotherhood Breakfast this Saturday at 10 a.m. Tickets are $15 and you pay at the door.
Yeah. I have a few, and I have flyers. Easier. Tomorrow evening, Thursday, March 7th. Join us at 6:30 p.m. at the Ossining Public Library in the Boudars Theater. This month's offering from the Ossining Documentary and Discussion Series, it is, of course, Women's History Month, is She's Beautiful When She's Angry. And it is a, a fascinating and compelling look at feminism throughout the generations from 50 years ago through today. And we have an excellent panel of women who will be joining us. To learn more, go to the website ossiningdocumentaries.org or look up the Ossining Documentary and Discussion Series on Facebook. This Saturday, from 11 a.m. to 3 p.m. at the Ossining Community Center is the Repair Cafe. Thanks to Green Ossining, they started the first Repair Cafe in Westchester County. And what that is if you have anything that needs some mending or some gluing or some repair, then bring it on down. And there are volunteers at the ready with all kinds of tools and skills to help your repair your beloved but broken items. And again, that's 11 a.m. to 3 p.m. and the village is a co-sponsor of that as we host it at the community center. And I will share this because it was Senator Dave Carlucci's office is doing everything they can to get folks to show up. On Thursday, March 14th at 7 p.m., the senator is hosting a town hall meeting at the community center. A number of elected officials have been invited to attend as well. I know that Assemblywoman Galiff will be in attendance, and the senator and Assemblywoman will be ready to discuss election reforms and other recent legislation that's been moving forward in Albany. So that is Thursday, March 14th. Any other comments or questions? Mark?
Okay, we'll move into administrative reports. Village Manager Deborah McDonald.
Thank you very much. I have a few things to share with you tonight. The Operational Center construction project, I'm hoping to be able to give a full update to the board at a near work session. We are waiting on final cost estimates at this point. So we're also waiting on some timelines for them. So as soon as we have the final cost and the timelines, we'll be able to come to the board and share with you the entire project and how we see that playing out for this summer. So we look forward to that. And I wanted to just mention that to the public. The Broadway Bridge is moving along. It is slow. It is behind schedule. It has been for quite a while for several reasons, but we are hopeful that by midsummer it will be reopened to the public. So I just wanted to give people a timeline for that project. At our next work session, we are going to be going through the 2019 projects that are by department and be talking with the board about those projects and asking for the board's input on priorities and what's most important to the board. So it would be really great for the community to watch or attend the meeting, because I think it's important for everyone to know all of the things that we do as local government in support of our community. I have begun to reach out to our downtown businesses to talk about parking, and I'm going to be meeting with the chamber on Friday. So Omar, I was going to ask if you might be available to attend. Wanted to give them sort of a heads up on where we were and what we were looking at, and how we expect to proceed with a parking study, and hoping that we can actually ask them for some assistance in reaching out to our businesses so that we can get a group of folks together to actually talk about it. I was getting my hair done today and asked the owners of Vaza Salon what they thought, and they were very happy to sit down with me and give me their input. And I think that it'll be good, because a lot of the downtown businesses will want to come together and talk about parking and where we're headed with that. So anybody that's listening, if you have ideas or concerns that you want to share with us, to make sure that we address those concerns while we're looking at parking issues, please email them to manager@villageofaustinink.org, and that way we can take care of your concerns. So I have a file already started from people that have called and complained to me, or shared their experiences, not all that positive, and so we'll be pulling all that together. Tomorrow is Records Retention Day. So our village offices will be open, but we will be dressed in jeans and sloppy shirts, because we're going to be going through really old files. The purpose is to liquidate and purge all of the files that are old enough to be disposed of. So we're going to be pulling out lots of boxes from the attic and going through things and preparing them for Friday, where our truck is going to be showing up to shred all of the documents that we can get rid of. So we will be open. We might not look nice when you get there, but that is the intent of the day, is to purge all the old records. So, and finally, I want to thank Jamie. She has been working on a new program called iCompass. It is going to be a way for us to electronically streamline our agendas and board documents and board management. It comes with a lot of different features that I think ultimately the community is going to really like. We will be presenting it to the board at a work session, and so I can give you more information on it in the future. It comes with public records tracker. It comes with a contract tracker. It also does video manager, and it integrates our YouTubes. It does closed captioning of our live and online videos. So there's a lot of great ways that our community can watch our meetings, and with the closed captioning, see that in different languages, and also see some of our documents. Jamie's done a lot of work to pull this together. It will be accessible for all of our boards and committees ultimately. And so when you go onto our website, you'll be able to find out who's on the committees. You'll be able to see all of the minutes, all of the agendas, all of the documents that are shared with all of our boards and committees. I think it'll be a great enhancement. I don't know that anyone will notice that it's different, because it'll look the same on a piece of paper when you print it, but it'll be a lot more accessible. So I want to thank Jamie. She's put in endless amount of hours to get it all set up and get people in the right categories and get it working. So it is online. However, it is not fully functional yet. Each, with more and more progress, we've probably got another 2 months maybe to get a lot of it up and running. So when you go there, you'll be able to see the basics, and I will be announcing when additional features will be added to make it fully capable of really giving us some good information. So I'm looking forward to sharing the website with the board and showing you all how it works. And that's all I have.
Thanks. I just, going back to your first comment about the parking discussion, I know that you included a number of the members of the Chamber of Commerce, or I guess probably the Chamber Board, and one of those was also a member of the DRWC subcommittee that focused on parking, and we also have 2 members of our Downtown Development Fund Council who are downtown business owners, so they're good people to talk to. And one of them was also a member of the subcommittee on parking as well. So my point is, the subcommittee from the DRWC should definitely be part of this conversation as well.
Absolutely.
So if they haven't been reached out to, then I don't know if you want to invite them to join the discussion at the chamber. Might be easier to just have that conversation with one group of interested stakeholders,
Right.
and they can all do the outreach from there. But that would be a good group to include.
I was actually hoping we could hold a few meetings at the different restaurants and people could come different times. So,
Great.
and then we can eat our way through parking.
Okay. Please.
Thank you. I'm not going to comment on the parking just yet, but I'm sure there's some coordination with our police department as well. And how does that? The public information part, the iCompass. Thanks, Jamie, for all the hard work that you do so much. I do have a quick comment on that, and that's something that I have brought up for years, and I have mentioned this in the past. I would like to make sure that all applications that go into the planning department or the building department, any drawings that are submitted, we already get them as a PDFs. So if I'm at home watching the meeting or watching the pretty much the meeting that happened last week, I would like to go back and be able to see all those documents. I have mentioned that before. We were doing that in the past. We have Eco 360 where we had some of the old files in there,
Right.
but we haven't been doing that for the past year or so.
So
That is going to be part of that process.
it will.
Sure.
And
Okay.
all boards and committees will be on this now too.
Okay.
So I think it'll really enhance the community's ability to see all the things that each board and committee are reviewing when they're deliberating and talking about an
Okay.
issue. But yes,
Looking forward to see that,
that will
definitely.
be. Mhm.
Thank you.
Corporation Counsel Stuart Kahn.
Thank you, Anne Marie. Good evening, Mayor and members of the board. While it is March the 6th, we did have some significant snow over the weekend, so just a few things with regard to that. In the past, when we would get complaints with regard to snow or ice that had not been timely removed, we were issuing orders to remedy, which both the building department and I agreed was a fairly silly process because they were given 30 days to basically get the situation repaired. So what we're doing now is we are actually issuing tickets as we do our garbage tickets. So the person gets it immediately and will be in court at the next court date, which is probably 2 to 3 weeks thereafter. I can tell you that we had, I think, 4 or 5 of those on Tuesday's calendar. They all resulted in guilty pleas and fines collected. So folks should know that. We have to spring ahead on early Sunday morning, so everyone just remember that move your clocks ahead 1 hour. That is my PSA for the day. There's been a lot of mention with regard to Landlord-Tenant Relations Council and mediation training. I'm sorry that Trustee Levin is not here, but on April the 3rd, which is the next LTRC meeting, I'll be working with Steve Dewey to provide some beginning mediation training for the members of the LTRC so that they can help out, in the court with issues that come up with regard to all that. And finally, I'm pleased to advise that the agreement between the village and the Down-to-Earth Markets for the farmers market is concluded and is signed. We had a few things to just finalize, but that's all taken care of, so that agreement is finished. And I'll be forwarding it over to John Zeltzman, but I'm just pleased to let you know, and I want to just thank John, thank Debbie for all their help in getting this one done. We started with one template, we ended up with a different one, but we're there, and all in all, I think it's a fair contract for both sides, and I'm pleased with regard to that. So thanks.
Police Chief Kevin Sylvester.
Good evening. First, I want to thank the mayor and the board for allowing me to arrive a little bit late this evening. I just came from the Ossining PTA's Learning Cafe. Tonight, we presented on school safety and went over with them some of the policies and procedures in the district and how we partner with them for things like lockdown, lockout, and other school safety procedures. We also had a brief discussion on some programs and ways that we can engage our youth in order to get ahead of some of our safety concerns. Right now in the police department, we're through our first quarter training, so we just finished with CPR, sexual harassment, workplace violence, and some of our other administrative tasks. Right now, we're focusing on individual efforts. We have one officer in instructor development, one going for firearms instructor, and one officer is in crisis intervention school. Coming up next month, we'll be doing our first half firearms qualification, so that'll keep us busy for now. With that little bit of downtime where there's not a major event going on in the police department, we are beginning to prepare for this year will be our New York State accreditation. Every 5 years, we have assessors come down and inspect our facility and all of our policies and procedures and interview staff in order to reaccredit our agency. So right now we have a good deal of staff that's dedicated to that and getting ready for that, and that should come sometime around May or June. We're waiting on our date for that, so that's going to be our focus for the rest of the first half of the year here. That's all for today. Thanks.
Thank you.
Organization announcements.
We've lost our crowd.
Village Board resolution.
Right.
Letter A, approval of minutes February 25th, 2019. Resolved that the Board of Trustees of the Village of Ossining hereby approves the minutes of the February 25th, 2019 regular meeting as presented.
So move.
Do I have a motion?
Comments on the board? This was the meeting that ended up happening on a Monday. It was last Monday. Madam Clerk?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Abstain.
Opposed? Letter B, approval of voucher detail report. March 5th, 2019. Resolved that the Board of Trustees of the Village of Ossining hereby approves the voucher detail report dated March 5th, 2019 in the amount of $548,569.86. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Comments on the board? Madam Clerk?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Letter C, small claims tax refunds 2019 Village of Ossining tax roll. Authorizes and directs the village treasurer to correct and adjust the tax roll of the Village of Ossining for 2019 to reflect the reductions in assessment as stated below, and that a refund of the taxes paid as stated therein be made. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Comments on the board? Madam Clerk?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Continuing business of the board.
So, I mean, we're not really prepared, but we got some emails today about the dock extension, and there's some deadlines coming up that are sooner than works well with our calendar. So I thought perhaps we could let the board know sort of what to anticipate and as much as we can tonight, because we might have to add a discussion and possibly even a vote next week so that the process can move forward, because it's due before we then have our next legislative session.
What I saw today, Mayor, from Tracy Corbett, was a request from Garrett Huffam with regard to a grant that he's putting in for the pier extension, for the dock extension. And I guess it's the grant has to be submitted by 3 p.m. on March the 20th. And with that, he would want a secret determination. But according to Tracy, and I don't want to get too much into the weeds, this would be what's considered a type 2 action, which would be categorically exempt from secret. And Tracy's already prepared what's called a short environmental assessment form. The other issue relates to consistency with the local waterfront redevelopment plan, the LWRP. The EAC met yesterday, so we weren't unfortunately aware of that. So if Gareth needs something before the 20th, it would be necessary to schedule a special meeting. What this board would do, and it doesn't have to really be formal, but it would be a recommendation to the EAC to provide, to this board a consistency review, which is required under our code. I'll follow further with Tracy as to all the mechanics of it, but what ordinarily we do is we try to get some documents to the EAC members so that they can review it. They prepare essentially a very short letter and it comes back. Most cases, it's not done through the BOT. It's done through either planning or zoning is the requesting agency. So it's more a matter of Tracy getting what documents are needed to the EAC and seeing if we can get them together, before their next meeting, which is after
Right.
March 20th. So I'll follow with her tomorrow so we can schedule that.
Well, okay, so if we're meeting, next Wednesday is our only meeting before this deadline. So if we need to approve the EAF, Tracy will be at our next work session. It's a heavy agenda already, so I'd like us to not. We've got some really great stuff we're talking about. We're looking at all the initiatives for 2019. We're learning about the village. The reason Tracy's going to be there is to learn about the village properties and all the parcels and how we may want to consider proceeding with those. So we have a lot that's on our plate. What you're describing to me from Tracy Corbett, our planner, if it's going to be a type 2 action and she'll provide an EAF, then there's not a lot for us to deliberate or discuss, but we would have to take a vote.
Well, if it's you're just going to basically say it's a type 2 action, and assuming that we can get the EAC to act before the 13th, it would be that it's a type 2 action and that you have received from them their, consistency report, which is basically what it is.
So then, do you need us to make a formal request that the EAC do an LWRP review? Usually we do when we send things to the planning board. This is an unusual circumstance.
We can do, yeah, what we could do is, what I would ask is this: why don't we do this? Do it as a motion before the board now, that the board will refer to the Environmental Advisory Committee for a consistency review, the pier extension project. That's the motion, pursuant to the village code.
So moved.
I'll be a second.
Any comments on the board?
Yeah, I just had a quick question. So,
Don't ask
So-
me to repeat it.
no, so they're gonna be going into a special meeting.
They'll have to.
They'll
yes.
have to go because I'm looking at the calendar. They're not
Right.
doing the schedule for.
They're not
so they have
scheduled
to be.
until
Scheduled
April,
last
until
night,
April,
apparently.
Until next April, till April.
Okay, all right. So, as long as we have a quorum, we'll be able to proceed with this.
Right. What I'll do is I'll get, Jamie Kane is out this week. I will get emails out to all the members tomorrow. So to
Okay.
see if we can get them all together, and I'll touch base with Tracy to get whatever she wants to send to them, and then they can just do it. They're very self-sufficient, that board. Let me tell
Oh,
you.
yeah.
Okay.
Great.
All right,
Okay.
thanks, Laura.
So, all in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. I trust that a quorum will be able to get together sometime in the next week and that Tracy will present to us whatever we need to understand to be able to move this forward. It's not a controversial topic. We've discussed the docket many times, and having this expanded public access to the waterfront is a benefit on many levels for the village. So, and we're grateful to Gareth Huffam and all the work that he's been putting in to move this process forward and to get the grant to help it financial opportunity, financially feasible for us. Thank you.
New business of the board.
Oh,
Yes, hi. So I just wanted to follow up on all of my questions and Trustee Bazemore questions regarding the repealed new additions and provisions to ETPA. I still don't understand it or get it. And the amount of phone calls that I've gotten and emails from multiple leaders and residents in ETPA buildings or buildings that once were ETPA. What the process will be in the manager's office and our departments, and also the process question that I asked you directly as well. I just haven't received any response whatsoever, so I kind of wanted to follow up on that.
Let me start with the first part, what you asked. From a procedural standpoint, what has occurred is that the resolution was sent to DHCR and to County Rent Guidelines Board. That was done last Friday. I know that County Rent Guidelines Board got it because I got back the green certified receipt card. I'm assuming that DHCR received it as well, but I just haven't gotten the card back yet. I have not heard either from County Rent Guidelines Board or DHCR at this point. With regard to the buildings that are between 6 and 20 units, that group, that would be up for DHCR to simply take them off the list, if that, because they have the list of all the available units. And that would be something they would have to do. I have not heard any communication from DHCR at all. With regard to the other group or the other class that was dealt with in that resolution, as of right now, no owner has signed on to that class. So as of right now, all those buildings that are 21 units or more are still ETPA eligible and still within ETPA. And those owners would have to file the necessary forms and documents as required by DHCR. I don't know where DHCR is in terms of getting those forms out. I'm not certain, but that's the process from that end. So, there's been no agreement reached with any owner at this point with regard to that. And one of the things that has to be worked out is all of the mechanics of doing just that. Should owners in fact sign on? I know that there are some owners who have expressed interest, but no one who has actually put pen to paper, so to speak, and done that. So all those units are still in the mix at this point. But the process is one in that regard that's an evolving process. Waiting, there are, as I said, there were certain property owners who had expressed an interest, and they have reached out. They reached out actually before the vote. There's not been communication since the vote, so we'll have to see where that goes from there. I know you asked me a series of questions at the last meeting, and I was not trying to avoid answering them. I have a list of them on my desk. I don't have them with me, so I can either answer them for you now, or I can put them in writing to you, whatever you prefer. I don't want to, I'm not trying to avoid it. I just don't have them in front of me, so I can't actually, I don't want to miss something that you may have asked.
Understandably so. If you could put it in writing, that'd be great.
I'm happy to.
And I'll send a list, just to make sure that you have all the questions. That
Whatever,
were asked. Okay.
yeah, send it to me and I'm happy to respond.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Any other new business? Madam Clerk?
Visitor recognition,
Very funny.
adjournment.
We have a motion to adjourn to executive session for matters of personnel related to specific persons.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And with that, thank you very much for joining us. We will be at Village Hall next week for our work session. This meeting is adjourned to executive session.